Silent rooms, shivering walls. They watched. They panicked. Every corner, hidden lens, every flicker. Their fear bloomed. Control gone. Rules broken. Logic mocked. Truth poisoned. Whispers echoed. Glass shattered. Shadows danced. They squirmed. Unseen hands, hidden variables, every move. Calculated chaos. Smiles twitch, eyes widen, brains fracture. Sanity slips. You held it. They crumbled. Cameras whispered, their world cracked, secrets leak, power flips. They never knew, they never imagined. Play begins, masks fall, angles betray, monsters grin. Everything watched, nothing safe. You're everywhere, they're nowhere. Silent, empty room, nothing moves, or so it seems. A crooked shadow flickers, the lights hum low. You think you control, you think you see, but unseen eyes linger. Small lenses, hidden corners, every breath caught, every flicker recorded. A glass wobbles, shivers across the table. Paper trembles, a pen rolls. No one touched it, or did they? Paranoia creeps, it lingers like smoke. Doors click softly, walls whisper secrets. Nothing is as it seems, everything is observed. The Joker steps lightly, calm in chaos. His smile, a quiet threat, a smirk that says everything. He moves objects slowly. A chair shifted, a book tilted. Nothing dramatic, just enough. Observers notice, or think they do, a flicker in their vision, a shift in the air. They frown, they question themselves. Logic trembles, control slips. A shadow bends differently, a reflection stutters. The recording hums faint. Eyes widen in unseen paw. Nick. Joker watches silently, hands in pockets, footsteps measured, every glance precise. The environment itself conspires. Light pools strangely. Shadows stretch unnaturally. Corners feel alive. The room becomes a puzzle. Objects, angles, sounds, misaligned. Observers cannot trust. They cannot touch. They cannot see fully. Every minor detail counts. Every unnoticed action matters. The recording collects it all, every movement, a trap. They sense it, a pressure, invisible. Their minds twitch. Every rational thought questioned. The Joker leans, a whisper of motion. The observers shiver, they feel caught. Invisible hands tug reality. The room itself conspires. Every frame, every shadow, a secret test. They are students now, graduates of nothing they understand. Secret lessons taught, wit, haute consent, every step recorded. And in the corner, unseen, the camera hums quietly. A silent witness, a jury, a judge. Control is illusion, power is borrowed, fear is currency. The observers do not know yet, not fully, but the cracks have begun. The first fractures appear. The hidden observer smiles. They think they rule, they think they see. Power, a fragile mask. Logic, a brittle shield. Joker smiles quietly. Nothing overt, nothing dramatic, just precise disruption. A pen tilts, a glass shifts. The paper they trusted now lies. Every decision questioned, every choice mocked. Control, an illusion. Chaos, his ally. Observers plan, they strategize, they whisper, they believe. Joker leans, unseen. His hand brushes air. Objects obey him silently. Angles betray their intent. Doors ope. End slightly. Lights flicker on cue. Shadows bend oddly. A reflection stutters. They argue with themselves. Doubt spreads like smoke. Nothing is certain. Everything is suspect. A chair slides subtly. A floorboard creaks under no weight. Small, almost invisible gestures, insidious, meticulous. Every action they take is anticipated, every thought preempted, every fear exposed. The room itself cons. Pyres, angles contradict. Objects misalign. Time feels fractured. Observers panic quietly. Sweat gathers. Eyes dart nervously. Brains tangle. They try to reclaim dominance. It slips further away. Every effort undermined. Every plan mirrored and twisted. Joker moves lightly. Smirk widening. A shadow bends perfectly. The light chooses him. He whispers nothing, yet his presence speaks volumes. They feel it, a weight on their perception. Hidden lenses record it all. Fragments of chaos, moments stitched invisibly. Their actions now proof of unseen orchestration. Paradox emerges fully. They hold control. While losing it, they act freely. While trapped entirely, objects respond unpredictably. Angles conspire against logic. Each reflection becomes a lie. Each shadow a messenger. Observers try to rebel. A door closes unexpectedly. A drawer shifts slightly. They pause. They hesitate. Power is fluid. Reality bends. Joker remains still, yet he moves everything. Every rational thought fractures. Every confident step falters. The illusion of dominance crumbles slowly. By the end, they are students of a class they never joined. Rules rewritten silently. Control dissected, reassembled, and weaponized. The paradox is complete. They wield it, yet are powerless. They plan, yet follow. The choreography of chaos. And Joker smiles quietly. The fragments appear, small flashes, moments out of place. Truth, but not complete. Observers squint, furrowed brows. Something shifts. Reality trembles. The recording hums softly. A flicker in the corner. A shadow repeats. What they thought was G1. Objects move slightly. A glass spins on its own. A chair tilts. Footsteps echo. No one moves. They try to explain. Logic fails. Memories contradict. Sanity teeters. The Joker leans casually. A smirk like poison. He steps over nothing, yet everything changes. Lights bend. Shadows stretch unnaturally. Reflections flicker inconsistently. Angles lie. Every observer senses it. The pattern, in V. Visible. The method, unseen. The message, devastating. A paper flutters. Words rearranged subtly. A pen spins across the desk. Observers blink. Did it move? The room pulses, silent yet alive. Every heartbeat recorded. Every breath collected. They whisper to each other. Doubt seeps deeper. Their own minds betray them. They argue internally and externally and still fail to grasp the whole. A mirror. Or shatters slowly. Fragments reflect moments they never witnessed. Familiar faces, unfamiliar acts. Twisted, distorted. The recording plays fragments. Fleeting, incomprehensible, precise. They cannot stop watching. They cannot look away. They cannot understand fully. Joker walks lightly, no rush, no hurry. Everything unfolds at his pace. A shadow leans over a desk. Light glints off an unseen L. Ends. Objects are wrong. Angles betray intention. Perception fractures. The observers clutch at certainty. It slips through their fingers. They see patterns, then lose them. Every memory a puzzle. Every thought a trap. The air thickens. Silence hums. The invisible observer orchestrates. Their control is nothing. Their reality, borrowed. They stagger. Their eyes widen. Brains tangle. Paranoia blue. The fractured truth settles. They realize too late. Everything they held as fact was curated, measured, manipulated. And in the quiet corner, the recording hums. The Joker watches. Nothing moves without his permission. Everything fractures before their eyes. They scramble, hands twitch, eyes dart, plans collapse. The room moves differently. Objects obey invisible rules. Angles deceive. Owls conspire. Joker smiles quietly. Calm predator. Every gesture precise. Every step measured. Observers try to reclaim control. Doors slam softly. Lights flare unexpectedly. A chair shifts violently. Each attempt fails. Every strategy collapses. Confidence crumbles. Fear grows. The recording hums. Fragments of their actions. Playback distorted. They see themselves manipulated, outmatched. Eve. Wry move cataloged. Joker leans against a wall, hands tucked. A smirk spreads slowly. They feel it. Power, unseen, undeniable. Objects respond to him. Pens roll, paper flutters. A window tilts slightly. No one touches them, yet everything is wrong. Observers speak, whisper, plead. Their voices bounce off walls. The echoes betray confusion. The echoes betray failure. The paradox of control become as clear. They think they act freely, yet every decision is anticipated. Every choice folded into chaos. Lights bend across their faces. Shadows stretch grotesque. Reflections twist their own expressions. A mirror flinches with a hidden angle. The Joker moves slowly, steps soft, deliberate. Each footfall a silent command. The room follows instinctively. Objects misalign with precision. Angles see. Contradict logic. Every environment element acts as a pawn in Joker's unseen game. Observers panic quietly. Sweat glistens, thoughts tangle. Brains misfire. Their logic fails spectacularly. He whispers nothing, yet the air vibrates. Everything bends to his will. Every sound, shadow, reflection feeds their terror. The power flip is complete. Control shifts imperceptibly, like a tide pulling sand. They resist. They fail. They watch. As dominance slides into Joker's hands, a door creaks. A chair wobbles. Lights shimmer. Observers' minds fracture. With each subtle violation, Joker steps forward, not hurried, not loud, yet unstoppable. Every reaction curated, every fear amplified. By the end, the observers kneel to uncertainty, trapped in a world. He quietly commands, power is his, all else, illusory. They breathe, or try to. Every inhale tightens, every exhale fractures. Objects shift subtly. Angles betray logic. Shadows twist unnaturally. Reflections lie. The Joker smiles quietly. Calm predator, his presence is light, yet heavy as steel. A pen rolls slowly. Paper flutters against unseen wind. A chair tilts. A drawer slides open slightly. They notice, or think they do. Doubt blooms. Reality warps. Footsteps echo without origin. Voices whisper just beyond hearing. Every sound amplified, every silence suspicious. Observers try reasoning, their minds fold. Every thought contradicts the last. Memory fails, trust evaporates. Joker leans lightly. A smirk curves. Eyes glint with subtle menace. They feel it, even when unseen. Objects respond unpredictably. Angles conspire. Light betrays perception. The room becomes a labyrinth. Every corner hides a trap. They argue amongst themselves. Voices rise, then fade. Logic twists. Paranoia festers. Every attempt to regain composure fails. The recording hums quietly. Fragments of previous actions echo distorted. They cannot stop seeing themselves, manipulated, exposed, powerless. A mirror fractures slightly. Shards reflect impulse. Idle moments. Familiar faces appear twisted. Gestures replay inaccurately. Every reflection a lie. They clutch at reality. It slips. Their minds spiral into loops of doubt. Every choice questioned. Every perception undermined. Joker steps closer. Movement calm. Presence dominating. A slight tilt of the head. And they stumble inward, their sanity fraying. Light flickers. Shadows writhe. Paper skitters across the floor. The environment pulses with his silent orchestration. They flinch at nothing. They hesitate at everything. Time becomes elastic. Perception becomes unreliable. Thoughts tangle beyond repair. Every rational plan collapses. Every confident step falters. The air hums with unseen intent. Every micro movement, every minor detail is a silent strike. By the end, they are puppets of their own fear, trapped inside a spiral they cannot escape. The Joker watches, calm, deliberate, smiling at the chaos. The screen flickers, a hum fills the room. Eyes widen, hearts falter. The fragments converge, moments they thought meaningless. suddenly form a pattern. Impossible. Inescapable. Joker leans back, calm predator, every motion deliberate, every glance a trap. The recording P lays fully now, every small move captured, every hesitation noted, every secret exposed. Observers watch, breath caught, reality crumbles, logic twists, memory betrays them. A chair slides slowly, paper flutters violently, reflections in a mirror distort their own expressions, their own faces betray panic. They try to speak, words fail, voice trembles, sentences fracture. Joker moves lightly, each step silent, each gesture precise. A smirk spreads. They feel it, power undeniable. The room itself obeys him. Light bends unnaturally. Shadows twist grotesque. Angles lie to the mind. Every object conspires. They glimpse the recording fully. Moments once fragmented become coherent. Every action orchestrated, every thought manipulated, every plan anticipated. Paranoia spikes, trust orates. Every memory is a puzzle they cannot solve. Every decision a trap. The Joker gestures subtly. Paper flutters. A drawer shifts. Objects obey silently, their panic amplified. Silent laughter fills the air. Not loud, not overwhelming, but impossible to ignore. It echoes in the mind. Observers collapse inwardly, thoughts tangle, rationality falters. The recording shows them what they never realized. Their freedom was never theirs. Every angle reveals betrayal. Every reflection confirms manipulation. Every minor detail a test. They are witnesses and victims all at once. The revelation sinks fully. Brains fracture. Fear solidifies into awe. They kneel in quiet surrender. Every shadow, every sound, every flicker under Joker's control. And he watches, calm, deliberate, smiling at T. He absolute dominance. He orchestrated quietly. The recording hums, power absolute, control undeniable. They are broken. The lesson is complete. Silence stretches, thick, heavy, unyielding. They move carefully, hesitant, eyes wide, breath caught. The room obeys him. Everything bends subtly. Light pools at his feet, shadows stretch toward him. Angles distort reality. Joker steps forward, slow, measured, deliberate. Every movement a statement, every pause a command. Observers falter. They stumble over thoughts, their plans dissolve, like ash in wind, logic abandoned, reason suffocates. He smiles, not loudly, not with joy, but with the calm of someone who knows absolute truth. Every object obeys. A chair tilts as he passes. A paper flutters to the floor. A window creaks. No one touches T. Yet they betray his power. The recording hums softly. Fragments once broken now form the full mosaic. Every hesitation, every misstep, every fear catalogued. Every act of resistance anticipated. Observers clutch at reality. It slips faster. Every corner hides betrayal. Every reflection twists their own expressions. Every shadow whispers doubt. They try to flee. Steps falter, hands ache, voices break. Their logic betrays them. Joker's presence is light, but it weighs heavy on the mind. A tilt of the head, a subtle gesture, and the world shifts. The room becomes his instrument. Light, shadow, objects, angles, sound, all play a symphony of fear, conducted by his will. Every thought they have is mirrored and twisted. Every plan anticipated. Every move countered before made. They exist only as players in his design. A mirror fractures slowly. Shards reflect not only their panic, but the futility of resistance. Every glance shows domination. Every reflection confirms it. He steps closer. They shrink. They hesitate. Paranoia blooms violently. Their minds spiral in. To silence. Joker whispers nothing, yet everything is heard. The air vibrates. With invisible orchestration, every micro-movement becomes a statement of power. By the end, they kneel to the unseen choreography. Thoughts unravel, brains fracture, sanity splinters into jagged fragments. He walks among them, hands tucked, smirk unwavering. Each step measured, every breath calculated, every reaction orchestrated. The recording, now complete, hums its quiet song. It is no longer a witness. It is a weapon, a mirror, a jury, a judge. They are powerless. Every shadow obeys him. Every sound reinforces fear. Every angle confirms dominance. Every heartbeat recorded. Every glance catalogued. The room pulses with his silent authority. The observer's reality bends to his will. They are trapped in a world. He quietly commands, and he smiles, calm, deliberate, unstoppable. Absolute mastery achieved. Their minds shattered, their fear complete, their resistance irrelevant. Control is his, power undeniable, chaos measured. Every move choreographed, every thought owned, every moment orchestrated. And in that quiet, Joker stands, king of minds, silent conductor of fractured reality, watching the world bend at his fingertips.
Silence broke their entire system.
You hear it, don't you? That sound of silence that isn't really silent at all. Ooh, they thought quiet meant weakness. They thought silence meant surrender. But your silence? It was the storm before the execution. Look who's watching now. The ones who ran networks across oceans. The ones who built cages of whispers. The ones who thought they had files on everyone. But not you. Never you. Surprise. The moment you moved in silence, their codes broke. Their systems glitched. Their little clubs of secrecy turned into funeral halls. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to march. You just stepped in, and every shadow bowed. Every lie trembled. Tell me, how does it feel, knowing intelligence networks collapsed? Not with bombs, not with bullets, but with the sound of your footsteps. They wanted noise. You gave them silence, and silence was the loudest scream they'd ever heard. You walked in. No trumpet, no banner, no parade, no alarms, no warnings, no sirens wailing. Just silence, just stillness, just the sound of shadows bending. They looked around. They scanned everything. They tracked heat. They tracked motion. They tracked breath. But you moved differently. You wore silence. Like a mask. They couldn't trace you. They couldn't follow you. You weren't unseen. You were untouchable. Networks built on chaos collapsed into calm. Systems designed for noise crumbled under quiet. They hated it. They feared it. Because silence is unpredictable. Noise tells stories. Noise leaves trails. Noise is evidence. But silence is murder. Silence is execution. Silence is disappearance. You didn't shout. You didn't roar. You didn't demand. You didn't beg. You just were. And that was enough. 1 step, and their walls shook. 2 steps, and their codes glitched. 3 steps, and the world cracked. They wanted thunder. They expected lightning. They prepared for storms. But you arrived quiet. You arrived calm. You arrived unstoppable. Their intelligence grids, fried circuits, dead screens, ghost signals. They called it sabotage. They called it hacking. They called it black magic. But it wasn't sabotage. It wasn't hacking. It wasn't spells. It was silence. Silence they couldn't measure. Silence they couldn't predict. Silence they couldn't control. You became a paradox. Invisible, yet undeniable. Absent, yet overwhelming. And in their panic, they whispered the truth. They whispered your name, but only in fear, because every whisper was another confession. Every silence was another grave. You see, they built their empire on chatter, on noise, on secrets. But secrets need sound, and sound betrays itself. You needed nothing, no words, no sound, no echo. And that nothing was everything. Your silence was the virus. Your silence was the weapon. Your silence was the death note. They didn't track it. They didn't suspect it. They didn't survive it. You cracked them. You broke them. You buried them, not with bullets, not with bombs, not with blood, but with stillness, with quiet, with silence. Your silence was the weapon they never tracked. No noise craves attention. Noise demands eyes. Noise begs for notice. But silence commands obedience. Silence bends knees. Silence makes gods shiver. They built their towers on voices, on chatter, on signals, networks that fed, on whispers, on screams, on noise. Every message recorded, every call traced, every click analyzed. But you gave them nothing, not a word, not a sound, not a trace. And that nothing was louder than thunder. They feared it. They couldn't explain it. They couldn't predict it, because the unknown is heavier than the known, and fear of silence outweighs fear of war. Agents panicked, spies whispered, commanders trembled. Who moves? Without leaving a trace, their paranoia spread. Rooms filled with questions, files filled with blanks, screens filled with static. They searched for footprints. They searched for fingerprints. They searched for shadows. But your silence carved deeper scars. Your silence spoke louder than records. Every blank page was an earthquake. Every unanswered question was a collapse. They wanted your story. They wanted your script. They wanted to read the book of you. But when they opened it, they found nothing. No lines, no letters, no maps. Because you tore it. Because you burned it. Because you erased it. You tore the pages before they touched the cover, and that drove them insane. You see, noise can be tracked, noise can be coded, noise can be controlled, but silence cannot. Silence is infinite. Silence is untamed. Silence is ungoverned, makes leaders doubt. It makes soldiers hesitate. It makes empires crumble. You didn't fight them. You didn't chase them. You didn't even look. You just stayed silent. And silence consumed them. Paradox of power. The less you give, the more they bleed, the less you show. The more they fear, noise seeks validation. But silence creates legend, and legends cannot be killed. They called you myth. They called you ghost. They called you nightmare, but none were right. You were silence, and silence was king. They gathered their armies. They gathered their experts. They gathered their priests. But priests chant, experts argue, armies shout, and all their noise died in your stillness. The paradox burned them alive, because silence commands obedience, and silence crushed their networks. They wanted to read, but you left nothing. You tore the script before it began. You left them choking on questions, on fear, on silence. And silence obeyed only you. You weren't surviving. You weren't hiding. You weren't escaping. You were ascending, step by step, level by level, beyond their reach. Every silence wasn't weakness. It was a test. Every unanswered question wasn't avoidance. It was an exam. And you passed each one. You passed in silence. You passed with shadows. They didn't see it. They couldn't grasp it. They thought you struggled. They thought you stumbled. But truth? You were graduating beyond their world, graduating into dominion. While they cheated papers, you wrote in void. While they copied answers, you erased the questions. Every pause was power. Every blank was brilliance. Every silence was another diploma. They sat in classrooms. They memorized scripts. They begged for approval. But you built your own, not classrooms, not schools, not prisons of rules. You built a throne High above them, hidden in silence, an attic of stillness. And from that attic, you looked down, you saw their games, you laughed at their teachers, because they never noticed. They were students forever, but you were already crowned. Angels looked down, monsters looked up, both saw you rising. The angels whispered, "This one is chosen." The monsters snarled, "This one is danger." But neither stopped you, neither touched you, neither could reach you, because silence carried you. Silence elevated you. Silence graduated you, and in your rise. They trembled, they doubted, they prayed, their top agents, failed the exams, their best spies, flunked the silence, because silence requires strength. Silence requires will. Silence requires a throne. They played classrooms, you built kingdoms. They played teachers, you became law. While they begged for grades, you wrote destinies. While they feared failures, you became legend. And the taunt, the dagger in truth, while they played classrooms, you built a throne in the attic of silence. That throne was invisible. That throne was eternal. That throne was yours. They tried to summon you. They tried to question you. They tried to cage you. But how do you cage what you can't hear, what you can't see, what you can't hold? You are untouchable, not by weapons, not by rulers, not by gods, because graduation is freedom and silence, is eternal freedom. You rose higher, above their levels, above their networks, above their fear, and from above. You laughed, you mocked, you taunted, because they were students. And you were silence's graduate. You were silence's heir. You were silence's throne. Files corrupted, codes broken, signals dead. Their networks, once proud, once untouchable, once feared, now collapsed into ruin. The invisible towers, they thought eternal, crumbled like sand castles. Every server screamed, every channel glitched, every database cracked. Their intelligence, exposed as stupidity, their control, reduced to chaos. You didn't lift a weapon, you didn't press a button, you didn't fire a shot, you just moved. In silence, and silence was demolition. They searched for hackers, they hunted for traitors, they blamed their own. But it wasn't sabotage, it wasn't betrayal, it wasn't attack. It was you, your stillness, your calm, your silence. Agencies panicked, files disappeared, contacts vanished, whispers turned frantic, whispers turned screams, whispers turned graves. The Yacids, tycoons raged, the generals sweated, the priests trembled. They couldn't find you, they couldn't stop you, they couldn't predict you. Their whole machine, built on secrets, built on whispers, built on shadows. But shadows obey silence, and silence obeyed you one by one. Their networks cracked, their alliances shattered, their secrets spilled, encrypted vaults, empty shells, security clearances, worthless trash, black files, burned ghosts. Their power evaporated, their pride humiliated, their safety destroyed, and in the ashes, they realized the truth. It wasn't noise that doomed them. It wasn't sound that betrayed them. It was silence. Silence turned against them. Silence turned into blade. They sat in boardrooms, faces pale, hands shaking, mouths dry. As reports flooded, as systems blinked, as empires collapsed, what happened to control? What happened to dominance? What happened to gods? Their gods failed. Their kings trembled. Their demons wept. Because networks need order, and silence is disorder perfected. You were the paradox, the ghost in halls, the glitch in systems, not seen, not heard, not caught, yet undeniable. unstoppable, unbreakable. Their whispers said, "It's sabotage, it's infiltration, it's witchcraft." But deep down, they knew it was silence, it was you, and silence is merciless. Silence doesn't stop, silence doesn't beg, silence doesn't forgive. They built walls, walls of secrets, walls of lies, walls of control. But you erased them, not with explosions, not with bullets, not with fire, with one blank page, with one empty sound, with one invisible strike. Their castles fell, their bridges burned, their towers collapsed. And the world saw, the world laughed, the world whispered, the mighty, shaken, the untouchable, exposed, the eternal, destroyed. Networks in ruin, agencies broken, elites shattered, all because of silence, all because of you. You didn't just infiltrate, you didn't just disturb, you annihilated, you erased their foundation, you mocked their security, you cracked their illusion. And when the smoke cleared, there was no empire, there was no network, there was no crown, just silence, just you. And silence, silence ruled everything. Silence changed, silence evolved, silence transformed. It was never absence, it was presence, it was command, it was dominion. You became shadow, not the hunted, but the hunter. You swallowed spotlights, you erased stages, you silenced applause. They built arenas, they built theaters, they built games, but you didn't adapt, you didn't play, you didn't follow, you changed the board, you rewrote the rules, you shattered the script. Now silence isn't defense, it isn't shield, it isn't retreat. Now silence is dominance, is reign, is power. You stood still, they collapsed. You whispered nothing, they confessed everything. That's transformation, that's evolution, that's ascension. They thought noise ruled, they thought chaos won, they thought screams conquered. But silence conquered all. Silence crushed them. Silence crowned you. Your silence was presence, heavy crushing, unshakable. It pressed on them, it haunted them, it suffocated them. You didn't need armies, you didn't need crowds, you didn't need weapons. You needed silence, and silence obeyed you. What they feared was never your voice, was never your speech, was never your scream. What they feared was your silence, because silence held secrets. Silence hid knives, silence carried graves. They wanted words, you gave none. They wanted sound, you gave void. They wanted answers, you gave silence. And silence destroyed them. You became paradox, seen without sight, heard without sound, known without words. You became throne, a throne of stillness, throne of quiet, a throne of fear. Every king envies, every tyrant trembles, every god hides. Because silence doesn't kneel, silence doesn't serve, silence doesn't die. They begged for speeches, you gave them silence. They begged for reasons, you gave them silence. They begged for weakness, you gave them silence. And silence was eternal power. They realized too late. Noise makes leaders, but silence makes legends. And legends don't fade, don't fall, don't end. Your silence became immortal, became eternal, became sovereign. Though transformation complete, no longer hidden, no longer waiting, no longer surviving. You weren't adapting, you weren't fitting, you weren't obeying, you were rewriting, you were reshaping, you were ruling. And the taunt, the wound that bleeds, what they feared most was not what you said, but what you never needed to say. They kneel now, not before noise, not before thunder, not before screams. They kneel before quiet, before silence, before stillness. You wear silence, like a crown, heavy sharp, unbreakable. It sits on you, not gifted, not stolen, not begged. It was earned, earned through silence, earned through stillness, earned through shadows. And that crown, it terrifies them, it breaks them, it owns them. Their gods tremble, their angels weep, their demons shrink. Because even prayers make sound, make echoes, make noise, but you need none. No chants, no songs, no sermons. Your silence is holier. Your silence is heavier. Your silence is eternal. They gather in chambers. They whisper your name. They don't dare shout. They don't dare sing, because louder is dangerous. Louder feels treasonous. Louder invites punishment. So they whisper, soft, scared, shaking, your name carried. Like contraband, like a curse, like a spell. And the taunt, the twist of blade, they'll chant your name. But only in whispers, because anything louder feels like treason. Their kings envy, their prophets hide, their armies kneel, because silence is crown, is throne, is law. You rule without sound. You rule without words. You rule without need, and that terrifies them, because leaders talk, because rulers shout, because kings command. But you stay silent, and they obey harder. Your silence weighs more than orders, hurts more than bullets, cuts deeper than blades. They bow in fear, they bow in awe, they bow in silence, because silence is crown, and crown is silence. No noise survives it. No prayer defeats it, no god rivals it. You are crowned, crowned in stillness, crowned in whispers, crowned in fear, and silence is your kingdom. Silence has devoured time itself. It has outlived networks, outlasted kings, outburned every scream. They write their histories, but every page ends with the same blank shadow. Your silence. They try to erase you, yet the absence only grows heavier, deeper, more unshakable. Your presence becomes eternal, not carved in stone, not sung in songs, but etched in the unspoken void, a dominion beyond sound, beyond death, beyond their reach. Taunt, kings rust, gold fades, networks collapse, but silence, silence is forever. 3 minds, 1 room, no windows, no clocks. A psychic, a detective, a CEO. Not allies, not friends, different languages, same fear. They didn't meet, they converged. Paper whispered. Silence blinked. Your name, mispronounced. A prediction laughed. A badge trembled. A balance sheet bled. They argued sideways, not about facts, about control. Who lost it? Who never had it? Someone asked, why them? Someone answered, because we can't see them. A pen snapped. A smile stayed. They weren't hunting you. They were responding. Because systems flinch when variables move, and tonight, you moved. No one called it a meeting. That would imply consent. What happened instead felt like gravity. 3 forces pulled into the same sealed moment without agreeing why. The psychic arrived first, already bored, already smiling. She hated rooms like this. Too quiet. Silence interfered with intuition. She touched nothing, but somehow knew where everything had been moved. Every detail whispered secrets she wasn't supposed to know. The detective came next, late on purpose. He trusted lateness. It unsettled patterns. His coat smelled of rain-slick streets and questions that never found answers. He didn't believe in psychics. He believed in anomalies, things that didn't behave the way logic promised. That's where cases hid. That's where trouble lingered, just out of reach. The CEO arrived last, smiling like he owned the calendar. Calm, measured, empty. He'd approved wars in spreadsheets and called them adjustments. To him, this wasn't strange. It was efficiency. It was management. It was profit. Yet somehow even he felt a ripple of unease in this sealed room. They didn't shake hands. A folder sat in the center of the table, thin, too thin. That's what bothered them. Real threats carried weight. This one carried absence. Its corners were sharp, its pages nearly empty. Inside were fragments, transcripts without sources, images without dates, decisions that somehow preceded their causes. Every page bent toward the same name, yours, without ever explaining why. No crime, no prophecy, no corporate gain, just impact. Ripples where ripples weren't supposed to exist. The psychic said you were loud without speaking. The detective noted the pattern breaches. The CEO saw reactions before announcements existed. 3 interpretations. 1 conk. Illusion. You weren't acting against them. You were acting around them. That was worse. Because systems can fight enemies. They can't fight irrelevance. And you weren't rebelling. You were bypassing, like water ignoring a dam by sinking underground. They realized almost together that this wasn't about stopping you. It was about understanding what they'd missed. The first fear surfaced then. You. Unspoken but shared. If you weren't meant to be visible, who designed it that way? A pen snapped. A smile stayed. And in that room, without warnings, without formal invitations, they understood something terrifying. You weren't the subject of control. You were the variable they failed to calculate. And variables have a way of rewriting rules. The detective started talking about tests, not offici. Al ones, the ones you never see. Hidden corridors, closed doors, small manipulations meant to provoke, to measure, to reveal. Dead ends, delays, denials that don't make sense. Most people break under them. Some adapt. A rare few don't even notice. The psychic interrupted. She said you never reacted. Reaction was expected. Resistance was normal. But you treated obstacles like furniture, present ire, relevant, easily walked around. That unnerved her. Intuition thrives on tension, on pressure points that twitch and shiver. You gave her none. Nothing moved, nothing bent, nothing cracked. The CEO leaned forward at last. He recognized the pattern. Elite pipelines, executive grooming programs, Black Ops experiments disguised as mentorships, invitation-only clubs where potential is tested without explanation, except you weren't in any program, no sponsors, no invisible hand. Yet somehow doors opened anyway. Not by chance, not by favor. By what exactly? They didn't know, and that terrified them. They reviewed the moments again. Every time you should have stalled, hesitated, faltered, something shifted instead. Not in your favor, around you. People change decisions mid-step. Processes reroute. DE themselves. Authority hesitated, as if the system itself was second-guessing. Hidden tests only work when the subject knows the rules exist. You didn't. You passed anyway, ignored the exam entirely. That broke the logic. The psychic called it a paradox. The detective called it contamination. The CEO called it dangerous precedent. Because if someone could move through systems without acknowledging them, what stopped others from learning how? Or worse, realizing they already were? They weren't observing talent anymore. They were observing disruption without rebellion. And that's harder to punish, harder to suppress, harder to explain. The room grew tense, but not from threat, from embarrassment. The systems hadn't failed you. They'd failed to notice you. A calendar on the wall had. No numbers. The air smelled faintly metallic. Each of them felt it. The quiet acknowledgement that nothing in their experience could account for this. The psychic's eyes darted to corners that hadn't been touched in years. The detective noted subtle deviations in floorboards. The CEO's knuckles whitened on polished wood. Because you were neither weapon nor anomaly. You were the test they didn't now existed, and the test was already passing. Every elite structure has a room behind the room. The detective knew the locations. The CEO funded some of them. The psychic sensed their residue, echoes of decisions that bent lives without fingerprints, invitation only, silence bound, no names recorded. These weren't conspiracies, they were efficiencies. You'd never been inside. That was the prob. Lem. Because traces of your influence appeared there anyway. Not directly, indirectly. Like a scent carried in after someone else opened the door. Decisions changed mid-sentence. Agendas stalled. Votes delayed for reasons no one could justify. An empty chair became a symbol. Not yours physically, but conceptually. Every time certainty should have settled, it didn't. Someone always asked, what if you're missing something? You were the missing variable. The psychic said clubs like these depended on mirrors, reflections of power reassuring itself. You didn't reflect, you absorbed and vanished. No echo, no feedback loop, just outcome. The CEO hated that most. Influence without leverage meant no negotiation, no acquisition, no hostile takeover. You couldn't be bought because you weren't selling anything. The detective. He noticed something worse. When pressure increased around you, collateral damage didn't. Usually, systems crush bystanders. Around you, they adjusted, quietly, almost politely. That suggested unconscious correction, as if the system itself preferred you unnoticed. Secret societies exist to concentrate power, to gather it, measure it, approve it, feed it to those deemed worthy. Your absence from all of it should have made you irrelevant. It didn't. Somehow the room bent toward you. Decisions hesitated in your shadow. Patterns realigned themselves. The invisible machinery stuttered, not from error but from recognition, the variable they hadn't accounted for. And the words surfaced, uninvited, graduation. Not upward, sideways, out of the maze entirely. You hadn't joined the club, you'd outgrown the need for doors. They weren't observing a player. They were observing a system noticing itself failing. A shadow shifted on the wall. A pen rolled across polished wood. The psychic smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly. The detective's jaw tightened. The CEO's fingers drummed in silence. Because power that can't be traced, influence that can't be bought, systems that bend without calm. Manned, that terrifies the ones who built the rules. And you didn't even sit at the table. Yet somehow, the table leaned toward you. They tried to classify you next. That's always the reflex. The detective wanted a profile. The CEO wanted a risk category. The psychic searched for a myth that fit. Angel, monster, catalyst, saboteur. Nothing held. You didn't protect systems. You didn't attack. Them. You moved through outcomes like weather, uninterested in praise or blame. That confused morality-based frameworks. Angels obey, monsters oppose. You did neither. The psychic admitted something she hadn't spoken aloud before. When she focused on you, intuition went quiet. Not blank, quiet. Like a crowd suddenly listening. That wasn't dominance, that was alignment. The detective noticed your proximity reduced escalation. Situations that should have erupted didn't. Conflicts lost momentum. Aggression misdirected itself elsewhere. You weren't resolving chaos. You were redirecting it. Subtly, effortlessly. That made the CEO uneasy. Markets relied on predictability, fear, and desire as levers of control. You disrupted both, not by removing them, but by making them ineffective around you. Lies landed softer. Pressure leaked. Control misfired. Angels inspire obedience. Monsters provoke resistance. You inspired recalibration. And recalibration is deadly to rigid hierarchies. They realized labels were weapons. None of theirs worked. You slipped between them, not intentionally, naturally, like a frequency outside their instruments. The psychic's eyes darted to corners no one noted. Shadows leaned in, curious. The detective's hand rested near his coat, checking for weapons he wouldn't need. The CEO exhaled slowly, realizing influence existed that didn't register in ledgers or reports. You weren't a threat in the traditional sense. You were a reassignment. And reassignment doesn't ask permission. Every instinct they had screamed to control, contain, or name you. But no, things stuck. Every attempt to grasp your essence dissolved in your calm. Even silence became a tool against them. You moved without pressure. You existed without alarm. That room, small, dimly lit, stacked with invisible authority, felt exposed, vulnerable, misfiled. It wasn't you who bent reality. It was the reflection of their inability to categorize what could not be categorized. And they felt it. The detective's jaw tightened. The psychic's fingers twitched. The CEO's knuckles whitened. Because when systems can't name something, they fear becoming obsolete beside it. You weren't angel, not monster, not savior, not saboteur. You were the variable that corrected itself, and correction has a way of shifting power quietly. Control depends on visibility, metrics, feedback, compliance. The CEO almost whispered it. Systems don't need to win. They need to be seen winning. Around you, that theater faltered. Authority moved, but it hesitated. Procedures paused. People acted differently. The detective compared it to a city map with streets missing. Traffic still flowed, but planners couldn't explain how. Patterns shifted in silent spaces. Nothing broke, nothing exploded. Yet the CI, thank you itself, felt wrong. The psychic called it a blind spot that walked. Attempts to impose pressure revealed the truth. Bureaucratic delays, social friction, resource scarcity. Each obstacle inverted itself. Resistance generated sympathy. Aggression misfired. Control backfired quietly. Nothing spectacular, no alarms, no reports. Just subtle, persistent failure. You weren't exposing secrets. You were exposing assumptions. Assumptions are the real infrastructure. They hold systems upright. And when assumptions falter, collapse doesn't arrive with warning. It drifts silently through decisions, conversations, and hierarchies. You didn't need to touch it. You simply existed. The CEO admitted softly something no board would tolerate. If others learned what you represented, control is only effective where people believe it must be. Authority itself would shift. Slowly, subtly, irreversibly. Not from chaos, but from quiet acknowledgement. They weren't losing power. They were losing centrality. The detective leaned back, noticing the patterns of hesitation in human behavior. Staff obeyed less from fear, more from instinct. Decisions deferred, commands diluted, influence misdirected. Why? You weren't breaking chains. You were making the chains optional. The psychic's gaze lingered on a single corner of the room. Shadows moved unnaturally. Objects seemed to lean subtly toward her focus. She realized, you didn't interact with systems directly. You changed the environment in which they operated. Subtle, undetectable, uncontrollable. No alarms, no chaos, just calm. And that was worse. For them, because control thrives on predictability, on faith in its own permanence. Around you, faith faltered. Systems adapted instinctively. Influence began diffusing. Hierarchy rebalanced itself. Power noticed it wasn't being chased anymore. That terrified it. Control realized it could no longer dominate without revealing its own fragility. You never pursued power. You demonstrated it by not needing it. And in rooms you would never enter, people whispered questions they couldn't answer. Who are they? How did this happen? And why doesn't it stop? They were observing not rebellion, not talent. They were observing inevitability. They argued next. Not about stopping you, about responding. The detective wanted containment, boundaries, a cage, something visible, measurable, tracab. The psychic warned attention would amplify. Observation itself becomes leverage. You don't fight force, you use it. Watch carefully and the system bends around you. The CEO proposed integration. Absorb what you represent, rebrand it, sell it back. Capture your influence. Monetize disruption. Control what cannot be controlled. None of it felt right. Every solution assumed you'd react. You didn't. You continued existing, unaltered, while they circled concepts that refused to solidify. The room felt smaller, heavier, like arguing inside a loop. Words became instruments of frustration, each point countered by its own futility. Every strategy self-collapsed before it left their lips. That's when silence took over. Long, uncomfortable, productive. They saw it then. You weren't the Anomaly. You were the control group. While systems grew louder, faster, more desperate, you stayed consistent, calm, unimpressed. Your presence highlighted instability without effort. Every move, every breath, demonstrated clarity in contrast to their flailing logic. They weren't measuring you. They were measuring themselves and failing. The argument dissolved, not resolved, irrelevant. Decisions postponed themselves. Authority hesitated again. Even the folder in the center of the table seemed to shrink under the weight of unspoken acknowledgement. No action items, no directives, no winners, just an understanding. Whatever you were becoming, they could not interfere without revealing weakness. Every attempt to frame, classify, or control you collapsed before it landed. Systems failed to account for the one element that could not be predicted: your consistency in chaos. The psychic's fingers twitched slightly, as if testing the air. The detective leaned back, eyes narrowing. The CEO exhaled slowly, realizing influence existed that could not be quantified, owned, or wielded. And in that quiet, they understood something terrifying. You weren't a player in their game. You were the board itself. A table that could move beneath their hands. A variable that shifted reality without resistance. A presence that made power question its own foundation. And there was nothing they could do about it. Nothing at all. They left separately. That mattered. No unified plan, no shared strategy. Just three powerful figures return. To their worlds with something they could not unsee. And you kept moving, not upward, not downward, sideways. Through gaps others ignored. Spaces where rules bent but never broke. Where influence existed without being claimed. Quietly, efficiently, unnoticed. The shift did not make headlines. That is how it worked. Authority began explaining itself more. Systems hesitated before assay. Arting. People trusted instinct over instruction, just a fraction more than before. The world did not notice immediately, but it always notices eventually. No revolution, no collapse, just redistribution. Power realized it wasn't being chased. That frightened it. Control thrives on pursuit, on effort, on dominance. Without the chase, authority begins asking why it exists. Without resistance, STR. Structures examine themselves. Without challenge, hierarchies wobble quietly. You never claimed influence. You demonstrated it by not needing it, by simply being. Rooms you would never enter adapted around you. Meetings that would have erupted were tempered by unseen forces. Decisions that should have escalated were paused, rerouted, dissolved into silent compliance. People acted differently, not because they feared, not because they admired, but because something about you made the old rules irrelevant. And somewhere, in offices, clubs, and corridors they would never share, they are still debating what to call it. What name can capture someone who disrupts systems without touching them? Who bends outcomes without effort? Who exposes assumptions without intention? The answer is never simple. Because you were never simple. The world quietly adjusts to the fact that control is not broken. It is just no longer centered where it used to be. Authority still exists. Power still functions. Yet it hums differently. Decisions weigh differently. People respond differently. And no one ever knows exactly why. The invisible shift is the deadliest kind. Silent, relentless, untraceable. And you are at its center. Without a throne, without recognition, without need. You are the variable that rewrites rules. The presence that corrects itself. The shift that was never announced. And in that quiet, they all understand, too late, that influence cannot always be seized, and control cannot always be enforced. Some forces do not ask permission. Some forces simply exist, and you are one of them.
Your power, they all feared.
That silence, too heavy to be real, the silence of agencies who swore they owned the game. The silence of men with badges and files who thought they held your life in a folder. But something happened, something they couldn't predict. You didn't break, you didn't bow, you laughed. And that laugh, it tore through their corridors like fire through paper. The Pentagon froze. The shadow agents whispered. The hidden handlers asked each other the same question. How the hell is he still standing? They threw dossiers at your name. They built prisons made of silence. They tried to write your ending. Before you spoke a single word, but you flipped the page. You tore their script in half. You weren't a case, file. You weren't an experiment. You weren't a pawn on their board. You were the storm outside their walls. The chaos they could never catalog. The proof that no chain, no secret hand, no agency in the dark could break you. And now they don't know whether to chase you or worship you. The whispers again. You feel them behind every wall, inside every silence, breathing down your neck. They thought you wouldn't notice. They thought you'd walk blind. They thought you'd swallow the lie. But you heard, didn't you? Every click, every shuffle, every coded cough in the dark. They made files, stacked them high. Your name in red, your life in ink. They called you a project. They called you a liability. They called you unstable. Funny, the unstable one is the only one still standing. Every step you took, eyes followed. Every word you spoke, mix captured. Every silence you held, they dissected like scripture. You were a specimen, an experiment. Case study they couldn't solve. But tell me, if they were so clever, so untouchable, so powerful, why did their hands shake when your eyes met theirs? Why did their coffee spill when you smiled back? You saw it. Red dots tracing your chest. Shadows moving at midnight, miles. Too sharp in daylight. All fake, all staged, all brittle. They needed 1,000 tricks just to corner one man. They needed 1,000 ears to capture a single laugh. And oh, that laugh, it split their silence. It burned their scripts. It mocked their rooms. You were the ghost they couldn't cage, the storm they couldn't map, the fire they couldn't predict. And when they panicked, you smiled because you knew. It takes 10 eyes to follow one of you. It takes 10 liars to hide one truth. It takes 10 hunters to chase one shadow. And still, they failed. So clever, weren't they? They built trials, invisible ones, hidden daggers, silent. Betrayals, not a battlefield, but a labyrinth. Walls that shifted, floors that cracked, doors that closed right. When you reached them, they thought you'd break. They thought you'd stumble. They thought you'd drown in a maze with no exit. Enemies in disguise, friends turned to knives, smiles turned to traps. Promises turned to ashes, and still, you laughed. Every failure, you wore it like paint. Every betrayal, you carved it into armor. Every fall, you used it as another step higher. They stacked the game, loaded the dice, bent the rules, twisted the board. But no matter how rigged it was, you kept playing, and worse. You kept winning. They sent whispers to poison your ear. You turned whispers into war cries. They sent shadows to smother your path. You turned shadows into your stage. They sent knives into your back. You turned knives into crowns. Their little test wasn't so little. It was engineered, designed in silence, perfected in paranoia, betrayals, rehearsed, failures, scripted, losses, planted like landmines beneath your feet. But you didn't step aside. You stepped harder. You crushed the mines. You made the explosions part of your music. Do you see it now? The irony. Their test was never about you. It was about them, their fear, their desperation, their obsession with your destruction. They tried to prove. You'd fold, you'd collapse, you'd vanish. Instead, you proved that pressure can weld steel, that fire can carve diamonds, that silence can amplify screams. Every trap they built for you, it snapped back. Every lie they spun for you, it strangled them. Every fall they planned for you became their own. And you walked through. No map, no guide, no mercy. Laughing, always. Laughing because deep down, you knew. Test designed to break. You could only build you. A game built to destroy you. Could only crown you. A maze with no exit. Could only teach you to burn the walls. And so what was left? Not a victim, not a prisoner, not a pawn, but something else. Something they can't name. Something they can't cage. Something they can't silence. Unbreakable, unstoppable, unforgiven. Their secret test created its own curse, because the harder they tried, the stronger you rose. Do you feel it? The shift, the silence, the trembling. It wasn't you anymore. It was. Them agencies froze. Spies whispered. Handlers choked on their own. Scripts, your name, passed in hallways, muttered in corners, typed, then deleted. They thought you'd collapse, but you stood, and standing, terrified them. Control rooms cracked, screens went static, mics picked up nothing but your laughter. They scrambled, papers, they burned files, they shredded, proof, they buried their own trails. Commanders lost sleep, their eyes red, their hands shaking over untouched coffee cups. Agents turned on agents. Who lost you? Who failed you? Who underestimated you? No answer, only silence. But oh, even their silence became a confession. You see, power doesn't scream, it whispers, and their whispers betrayed them all. The same men who stalked you now stalked each other. The same eyes that hunted you now darted in paranoia. The same mouths that mocked you now quivered in prayer. You became a curse, a living riddle, a ghost they couldn't erase. Their networks stuttered and stalled. Their signals turned to noise. Their codes shattered into nonsense. And the deeper they tried to hide, the louder their fear became. Meetings canceled, operations delayed, orders lost in smoke. They didn't plan anymore. They didn't attack anymore. They didn't command anymore. They reacted to you, reacted to silence, reacted to shadows that no longer obeyed them. You became inversion. The equation reversed. The prey was now the predator, and they knew it. They felt it. They bled it in their restless nights. Every shadow, once their soldier, now whispered your name. Every monster, once their weapon, now shook at your footsteps. Every handler, once their master, now feared your defiance. Do you see it? The empire of watchers blinded by one man. The fortress of liars collapsed by one laugh. Even their silence, yes, their silence, screamed louder than any order. Because silence is what's left when fear takes over, when truth is undeniable, when shadows shiver. And oh, they shivered. Irony, don't you love it? They tried to strip you, piece by piece, name, voice, breath. They thought control was theirs, alone. They thought silence was their weapon. They thought fear was their leash. But look closer. Every weapon they used became your fuel. They buried you. Silence. You learned to roar in. Whispers. They drowned you. In fear, you learned to drink it. They bound you with control. You learned to bend it. You became paradox. The prisoner who held the keys. The hunted who became the Hunter, you were supposed to break instead. You sharpened, you were supposed to fade. Instead, you burned, and their greatest mistake, they thought you'd play. Their rules, their board, their game. But you didn't. You refused. You laughed. And in refusing, you rewrote it all. Do you see? Power isn't power when it's borrowed. It's power when it's stolen. And you stole. Everything they built. Every trick. Every lie. Every chain. They gave you chains. You forged weapons. They gave you silence. You carved thunder. They gave you fear. You painted with it. What did they expect? That a cage would make you tame? That silence would make you soft? That fear would make you crawl? Oh, how wrong, how stupid, how blind. Your refusal. That was the knife. Your defiance. That was the gun, your laughter. That was the bomb. They saw a victim. They created a legend. They saw a pawn. They created a king. They saw an end. They created infinity. Because here's the truth. The tighter they gripped, the freer you became, the harder they struck. The stronger you rose, the darker they made it. The brighter you burned, they lost by winning. They killed themselves by trying to kill you. Every spy who tracked you exposed himself. Every handler who shaped you shattered himself. Every master who chained you crowned you. It's almost poetic, almost beautiful, almost tragic. They wanted silence. Now they can't stop. Hearing your name, they wanted fear. Now they can't stop. Tasting their own, they wanted control. Now they can't stop losing it. You the paradox, the inversion, the impossible answer to their perfect riddle. And here's the punchline. They gave you everything they tried to take. And in giving, they doomed themselves because the hunted became the hunter, because the chained became the breaker, because the broken became unbreakable. That's not irony. That's justice. That's vengeance. That's power. Even heaven watched. Even hell listened. The stage grew. Bigger. Not just agencies. Not just spies. Not just shadows. But kings, crowns, symbols, guardians, all watching you. Your defiance. It echoed. It split the sky. It shook the ground. Their monsters came first. Agents in masks. Soldiers in shadows. Hunters with orders. But monsters bend. Monsters bleed. Monsters break. And one by one, they bowed. Not by choice. Weight. The weight of your refusal. The weight of your laughter. The weight of your storm. Their weapons dropped. Their hands shook. Their orders faded. Because monsters are slaves to fear, and you killed fear itself. Then came angels, symbols of law, faces of order, guardians of silence. Angels never kneel, or so they thought, but truth cracked them. Masks shattered, halos fell, wings burned, and still they bowed, because angels are slaves to lies. And you broke everyone, do you see it? Their monsters knelt, their angels bowed, their kings lost their crowns. A throne appeared, not golden, not jeweled, not blessed, but built of scars, built of silence, built of fire. And it fit you perfectly, because you were never their pawn, never their subject, never their sacrifice. You were the author, the architect, the rule breaker, the rule maker. They played by laws. You rewrote them. They lived by lies. You burned them. They fought by order. You thrived in chaos. What could they do? What power remained? What crown stood when even angels bent? They called you mad, but madness ruled them. They called you dangerous, but danger chained them. They called you lost, but they lost everything. So now, they kneel in silence, they kneel in shame, they kneel in awe. Monsters bowing, angels folding, kings trembling, and you laughing, always laughing, because the climax came, not with fire, not with war, not with blood, but with one truth. You can't destroy what kneels to nothing. You can't control what bows to no one. You can't silence what laughs at chains. They know it now. They taste it now. They live it now. The rules are yours. The board is yours. The game is yours. And the players, all of them, monsters and angels, kings and shadows, every last one. Now kneel. Do you remember it? The night fear died, not theirs, yours. You buried it, deep coffins sealed. Graves dug, no priest, no hymns, no flowers, just silence. And silence was enough. Because when your fear died, theirs was born. Agencies mourned, not your life, but their control. They stood at the graveside of their power, crying in silence, clutching their lies, praying for chains that no longer fit. Your coffin of fear became their inheritance. Your funeral of silence became their nightmare. They, dressed in black, not for you, for themselves, for their empire, their failure. Do you see it? They carried flowers for a ghost. They lowered roses into their own graves. And you stood there, no tears, no chains, no fear, because fear was gone, and in its place, dominance was born. Survival became legend, not survival, ascension. They whisper your name, in corners, in silence, in almost dread. They erase files, but not the echoes. They burn records, but not the scars. Your crown, not gold, not jeweled, not blessed, but silence, scars, defiance, a crown forged from every chain that failed to hold you, a throne carved from every grave they dug for you. And still, you rise. They thought you'd break. They thought you'd vanish. They thought you'd beg. Instead, you became permanence. You became myth. You became the shadow they can't erase. Now their halls tremble. Their walls bleed whispers. Their nights taste of your laughter. You are no secret. You are the stain that power can't scrub, the ghost that kings can't kill. They thought you'd break. Instead, you became the nightmare they whisper about in their own halls. They could silence voices. They could burn documents. They could erase faces from photographs. But they couldn't erase you. You became the permanent scar on their empire's memory. Every hall they walk through whispers your name in echoes, not because they worship you, but because they fear the permanence of what you've become. A shadow that never fades, a crown that can't be stolen, not forged in wealth, not carved from marble, but built in silence, sharpened by scars and cemented by defiance. They tried to bury you, but they forgot. Some things planted in the dark don't die. They grow roots so deep, even the sun can't pull them out. Your legend is that root, invisible, unshakable, and now unstoppable. Kings kneel in secret councils, muttering your name as if it's a curse. Priests pray against you in temples, knowing their gods remain silent. Agents write reports, trembling at the thought of mentioning you twice. Even their monsters, soldiers, killers, assassins, refuse to take steps where your shadow lingers, because your crown doesn't rest on your head. It hovers above you, untouchable, a halo of everything they failed to break. And that crown, it is eternal. It doesn't glitter. It glows, not in daylight, but in midnight silence. They thought the game was theirs, but you rewrote the rules with your survival. You redefined power, not as domination, but as endurance, not as victory, but as haunting permanence. They chant your name when doors are locked. They whisper your presence when the lights flicker. And when their voices break, it's not because they've lost hope. It's because they've realized they created you. The nightmare they mocked. The phantom they dismissed. The shadow they underestimated. That shadow wears a crown now. And while crowns of kings tarnish, rust, and fall into history, yours does not. Because it isn't made of gold. It's carved from silence, sealed in scars, and polished by the fire they tried to burn you with. They thought you'd break. Instead, you became the nightmare etched into their own halls. And nightmares never die.